Hi, in this video I have the Zoom F1 field recorder and it seems to have a problem with the lavalier microphone. This is the native lavalier microphone, the one that comes with the unit, and I plug it in here, and even if I tighten it like that, what I'm seeing is a very high volume being inputted into the Zoom F1. For example, this light flashes when the volume is very high, and also there's that bar graph. So if I do a little test here and I tap on it, you can see that the volume is very high and also that bar graph is climbing rapidly. Look at that. Right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the microphone section away and I'm just going to fiddle here and show you there seems to be something wrong. You can see that. Look at that. So what I noticed is as I was moving around recording my videos, I'd get a lot of crackling. It would be like so I thought my lavalier microphone was probably damaged. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to fault trace this if you have the same problem. So the first step is to determine if it is indeed the lavalier microphone. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to unplug this and put a different microphone or even just an aux cable. You can see this is basically just a fly lead. So it's just an extension cable. So if there was something wrong with the connector over there where it mounts into the circuit board inside, we'd also see some of that distortion coming through. And as you can see, when I try and move this, tap it, there is no volume being shown here. You can see that for a lot of movement here, vibration, you can see that it's not picking up a problem. So already I can tell that the problem is not on this jack over here. Even if I do try and move it around like that, it's not showing any noise or distortion. So what I can do is I can take this out now and then try the lavalier microphone. You could also try a different lavalier microphone and do your own test, but I already know that the problem must be on this particular one. So this is the one that came with the unit, and look at that. So it seems like there's a problem on the strain relief. This is called the strain relief. But before I start cutting into this cable, I just want to make sure there's no damage elsewhere on the cable. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take a peg and just peg that like so. What that means is now when I move the cable elsewhere, if I get that flashing light and the bar graph moving incessantly, then I know that maybe there's more than one fault on this cable. Maybe it's not even worth repairing. But obviously you should try get a new one, but maybe you want to use this as a spare. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to put my finger over the microphone so that it's not picking up the sound. And what I do now is I fiddle with this wire. Can you see that I'm pulling it and I'm holding it in my finger like that to see if I get any of that loud noise. And you can see that as I fiddle with this wire, I'm not actually getting any of that noise. There is some volume shown there, but that's my voice being picked up on the microphone. So I'm just twirling this a little bit, just seeing if there is any damaged section here. And then I'm just testing here as well, and no, there's definitely no problem here. Now the next thing is to take it in your hand and just to go like this. And what I'm feeling for is a bump or an imperfection, or the thickness of the cable changes, because that means that there was a tear in here, or maybe the insulation broke and it's just the wire. So I'm feeling it, and there is a consistent feel as I pull this through my fingers. So there's no damage on this wire. So right, so I've ascertained that the damage is not on the wire here. It is definitely in this section over here. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to try and isolate it. Is it here, or maybe even in the plug? Right, so I'm going to hold the strain relief still and try, yeah, wow, look at that. So what I'm trying to do is I'm holding the strain relief still, but I'm actually just twisting this cable. So somewhere here, there seems to be a torn part of the wire. Look at that. Right, so I'm going to now work from this side here. I'm going to hold this in place and work here. And nothing is happening over here. You see I'm twisting it and bending it back and forth. So it's definitely from this part of my thumb going that way. So I've ascertained that if I cut this wire, if I cut it over here, I'll be fine. So if I wanted to reuse the Zoom F1 field recorder and maybe make my own 3.5mm jack, I could just cut this here, solder it onto a 3.5mm jack, and then continue, but then I wouldn't have this nice nut that holds it in place. So worst comes to worst, I could just use one of these. This is a replacement 3.5mm jack. That would be the ground or the 0 voltage. And then you would then use these wires over there for the left and the right. But obviously this being a single channel microphone, you'll only use one of these terminals. So you could just cut that, tin it. Tin it means just put some soldering iron on it and then solder it onto this jack. That will be my backup plan. But what I want to do now is see if I can fix this, because I would like to use this particular connection because I like the fact that it's got this nut, so it holds it in place. Maybe that's partly the problem. Maybe what happened was while we were in the field, the actor had pulled on this, and because of this, it actually tore. So maybe that's actually the problem. But anyway, I'm now going to see if the damage is sitting here at the strain relief or just after the strain relief. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to hold that in place and just move the wire after the strain relief. And so far nothing is happening. And it seems like nothing is happening. Now I'm going to hold on that side and I'm going to move the Zoom F1 around. Yeah, there we go. See, there's the problem. So it seems like it's definitely at that strain relief. So what I'm going to do now is I'm actually remove this and I'm actually going to just cut this. So I'm going to have to cut it over there. Right, so I'm just going to take the insulation off over here. This is what we're dealing with. There's the earth and there's the signal wire. Right, now what I have here is a multimeter and it's going to measure continuity. That means that when there's a short circuit, it makes a sound. So if I just show you, if I measure between there and there, the meter makes that sound, it's telling me there's a dead short. Also it shows 0 on the screen. So what I'm going to do is first test the ground side. The ground is there, so that's kind of the chassis, and I put this on the cable over there. Foil or the wire around the signal cable is the ground wire. So look at this, no problem at all. So we can immediately tell that the problem is in the signal cable. So if I now go to the signal cable, now on this particular connector, it is the tip. If I put the one crocodile lead on the tip and this one over here, already we're hearing problems. It's not making good connectivity. There it's working and I move it, look at that. Short circuit. It's intermittent and that's why it's making that crackling. So unfortunately this is definitely faulty, and look at the wire, it's just coming out. Did you see? I just pulled the wire and it just came out, so it's got a tear somewhere there. So what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to open this a little bit here. But in this case, before I repair this, I'm just going to show you what to do if you're sitting with this and you don't want to try and repair this old connector, and you just buy yourself a new connector and you can still use the original lavalier. So I'm going to first fix this. I'm going to put that onto this connector here and get that working. Right, so you are going to need a soldering iron. I've got one over here. Right, so I'm just going to put some solder over here and there on the tip. Right, so now I'm going to work with the cable here. I'm just checking the length. We don't need the signal wire so long. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to strip it a bit. Preferably use wire strippers rather than side cutters. So there we go. And now I'm just going to put some solder onto it. The signal wire has been tin. Tin just means it's got solder on it. And now what I want to do is I'm going to tin the earth wire. So having a closer look, you can see that's tinned, that's ready now, and all I need to do is solder that onto there and put that into there and solder it. First solder it before you tighten it. Now the next step is to put the cover on. So there we go, there's the cover. You must put this first, otherwise you'll have to desolder this and redo the job. So now I've got that all ready. This side has been tinned, this side has been tinned. What I want to do is just solder these on. Now what happens is, if you put this like that and tighten it, you'll find that when you're soldering it, it actually gets too hot and the heat from there eats into the plastic. Now because this is really thin and we are working with heat. I'll take a bit of insulation tape. This is very good insulation tape. It's heat resistant up to 90 degrees. And I just wrap this around here also because I'm going to tighten the wings here around this cable so that if you pull on it, it won't just break the wires. So now what I'm going to do is I want to first solder the earth wire or the ground wire. So I just put it like that. Right, now there's many ways to do this. I'm just going to solder it here while it's in place there. And then again over here. Right, so it's soldered here. It's a bit too much solder here. I'm just going to remove some of this excess solder. There we go. And now what I need to do is just flap this back like that and tighten it onto the cable. Right, so it is now tightened onto this cable. You can see that this cannot move. It is very strong now. And all I need to do now is do the signal wire. Right, so now I have the signal wire and then the ground wire, and now I can close it up. If you want to make it even stronger, you can use heat shrink. You can use a little bit of heat shrink and then wrap it in heat shrink, or you can put tape and then you just put this back on over here. You can see there's no noise there, all working. And here on this side, you can see that this is working fine. And here, unplug, plug in, yes, it will do that. But once it's in, you can see that it is now working fine. Now, in this case, you can see that the connector I've used has quite a big strain relief and the cable is thin. Try get one that is quite snug here. You might want to also use things like heat shrink to make it tighter here with the wire where the strain relief is. Now, if you want to reuse the old connector, the one that came with the Zoom F1, now I'll show you how to do that. Right, now this one we know the fault is sitting here. What is happening is the signal from there to there is intermittent, and even when I pulled the signal wires, the copper, they just came out. So somewhere in here it is actually torn. So unfortunately I'm going to have to actually cut this open. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to cut it. I'm assuming it's broken just on the edge here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut the strain relief off and get access to just the wire. All right, there we go. And somewhere along the travel of this wire, it is torn. Yeah, you can see there it was. So that's where the damage was, because look, there's no copper there and the copper is only there. So I can assume that I can reuse this connector, because I bet you that if I test from there to there, it'll be working fine. So I'm just going to expose a bit more of this. There we go. Okay, in this case, I'm going to leave this nylon intact. Going to use the multimeter. Right, so let's see now. Yeah, there we go. So actually the problem was at the strain relief. Because look at that. The ground wire I know is fine. So what I can do is now solder here and there, build this up so that it is strong and doesn't tear, and then I can reuse this actual connector because I like the fact that it's got this fastening nut. Right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to solder that to that and then the common wire or the ground wire together, but it's going to be very weak here. So what I need to do is fashion a strain relief or something that will hold this tightly in place. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to build my own strain relief. So here I've just got a bit of tube. This is just some rubber tubing from an irrigation setup. I just cut a little bit off, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to thread it in here like that. Right, so ultimately what's going to happen is it's going to look like that. There's my strain relief, and what's going to hold that strain relief in place is going to be heat shrink. This is a sleeve that when you heat it up with a flame, it shrinks up and it gets tight and holds things in place. So what I need to do is put the heat shrink on so long, like that. There's the one. So I need to put the heat shrink in place. So I'm going to put this one on in first. And I'm going to put another one here just so that it's extra strong. Right, now it's time to just solder these wires together. I'm just separating the nylon from the copper. So I'm going to actually start with the copper first, the common wire or the jacket. Right, now I'm soldering the signal wire. Now I'm just going to put a tiny bit of heat shrink just on the signal wire and just a little bit on the common wire. Right, now I'm going to quickly do a test. Right, so it's plugged in there. As you can see, when I tap on the mic, that's working. And let's just see if I fiddle with this. All fine. Right, now I'm going to slide the rubber tube over the wires. Right, so that is now slid in there. Right, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take normal insulation tape and actually tape this. Right, now I'm going to put this heat shrink over here. There's the first heat shrink. I'm going to heat it up. Then I'm going to put the second heat shrink over there. And then the big one is going to go on the side over here. With heat shrink, work from one side to the other. You don't want to get air stuck inside. This one is a bit too long. I'm just going to cut it a bit. Right, so now you've effectively built a strain relief. There you can see. Right, so you can do this option, or you could do the other option I showed, and you can make this shorter if you want. It didn't have to be this long. And thanks for watching, and cheers.